During this pandemic, I decided to learn Blazor, which for me meant learning Blazor, ASP.NET, C#, and a few other things that would go along with that. So what I wanted to do to learn was to take the original template that it came with and add a few things. And in this case, what I wanted to do was actually click a button to send an email. So something very basic to see if I could put some of these pieces all together. So if you've been playing with Blazor, this template should look familiar, but this is what I've added: a button to click and send an email using SendGrid, and then a few different variations of the code behind that in order to sort of take it to the next level, the next level, the next level. So that's what I'm going to show over the next couple of minutes. To start with, you're going to want to make sure you're working in Visual Studio, at least version 16.6. So I'll create a new Blazor app and show how to connect it so that it works with SendGrid. Now, to make this work with SendGrid, I need to access the NuGet packages and bring in the SendGrid code. So right-click Solution, pick NuGet, browse, type in SendGrid, and you'll find the SendGrid code that we're going to click on for the project and install. Once it's installed, you'll see under Dependencies that SendGrid is now available in the packages. Now the SendGrid website gives you the option to create an API key and then give some sample code in order to test out that key. So this is the sample code. It's under version 3-C#-code-sample, and that's the code that I'm going to take and bring into Blazor with just a few modifications and be able to show how this works. But rather than watch me type, I'm going to show you where these files are already available up on my GitHub page. So this is the email file that I've created that is up on GitHub, and there are just a few things on here that I'm going to point out. I named the page /email, and I've added in the using SendGrid and using SendGrid helpers mail, which are required to use the SendGrid code. I edited the heading to say this is for email, and I copied the button code out of the counter page and simply changed what the button says to execute, click to email. Then I took the sample code available from the SendGrid site and put it into a code block, and within the code block made just a few edits. So I actually hard-coded in my API key. That line in this example is actually commented out right now. And I put in the email address that this is being sent from, as well as the email address that I'm going to send my sample email to. So keep in mind, you need to get your own API key. It's free. And also authenticate your sending email in order for this to work. But then that's it. Now you have a new function within your Blazor template app that's going to send an email. Once you create this as a Razor page, run your template, and at the top of the screen say /email, and that will bring you to the page where you can now click to email, and you will send an email to whoever you chose for your sending email recipient. When I first ran this, I had put my API key in as a string, just hard-coded in. Then I took the same code and I used the environment variable for SendGrid API key. And in the comments above, I explain how to go about getting an environment variable to be able to be available to the code. I found that it needed to be a system variable and I needed to reboot. So I might have overkill on there, but until I rebooted, that environment variable did not seem to be available to me. My next step was to create an email to page, which would allow me to put in an HTML form to pick up the person's name, email, subject, and message. So I did that using edit form. And again, all this code is up on GitHub. But the edit form code links through this class called edit model and page, where I defined the name, the email, subject, and message as strings. And then I'm linking that model to my form by creating an instance of the model called new email, which is right down here. And then rather than having all of that information hard-coded into my code, Now I'm going to pick up these variables. So the variables are new email, new email subject, new email message, and I'm now passing that information as parameters into the sending email, into the SendGrid process to do sending the email. I used component data annotations so that in the model where I have name, email, subject, message, I was able to say, well, email should be formatted as an email address and name is required. So those options are only available if I've put in the data annotations option. Email 3 does basically the same thing, but now I've taken the model out and I've put it into a separate file. So kind of getting to a little bit better coding practice where the model is being referenced as opposed to just being hard-coded directly into this page. So my email model, it's no longer email model and page. That model is in my data folder and it's called email model. So it's the same code but in a separate file. In this file, I do have data annotations because I still want to say required for name and email should be an email address. Then back in my email 3 page, I was able to take out the data annotations line. Again, I'm trying to keep all of this code as minimum as absolutely possible, but I did need to add in the reference to Blazor app .data so it would know where to find that email model. Now in email 4, I wanted to again use the same code, but I wanted my API key to be stored in the app settings.json configuration file. So in order to do that, I'm going to have to connect to that file from within my Razor page. The 2 lines I needed to add to make that work were one, injecting iConfiguration, and I'm going to call it configuration, and using Microsoft extensions.configuration. So those 2 things go together to allow this configure, open bracket, SendGrid app key, close bracket, to be able to be accessed to bring the API key into the application. Finally, for email 5, I got really fancy and I used a service in order to send my email rather than have everything coded directly into this page. My goal here was to understand how a service works and also to put a little feedback into the system to say, yes, the email was sent, or no, it failed. So now I've added a task that I'm going to execute when the button is pressed. I have my form and I also have an if statement that checks to see if the task completed successfully. And I have now kind of a call to a subroutine saying, go run the send email with these parameters in order to execute the email, give me some feedback, update the screen, and then clear the mail form when I'm done. So I put that code for sending the email into a service, which I've put into the data directory. And if I bring that up, you'll see it's got the same extensions that I needed before when it was in my main page, but now I've created this class called email service, and I've included some information so that the configuration information so I could get my SendGrid key out of the app settings.json file. I'm also here getting my sending email and my sending name, which are the authenticated emails from SendGrid. And also all of the rest of the code is just hard. I'm pulling in my message and my subject, but it's basically the same code that we were looking at before, but now I'm doing it through the service. And the name of this service is service send email. So the file is emailed service.cs, but the actual group of code that it's calling from the Razor page is service send email with these 3 parameters: who is the email of where it's going, the subject, and the message. And then I'm using try catch, which try means see if it works. If it comes back with no errors, great. If there's an error, then send back the message failed to send email. And I'm taking those back as responses, and I'm using that response to determine what kind of an alert I'm going to show when that goes through. So when I go back to my page, you will see that I am now using this email service. I'm going to call it locally my email sender. And I'm using my email sender, and then it's services send email with those 3 parameters. It's going to come back with a response. When the response comes back, before I do anything else, I'm going to clear out the email form. I'm going to tell the system that that form now should be cleared. And I'm going to wait a few seconds while a alert is displayed. So if my mail response is null, if I don't have a response yet, nothing's going to show up. But if it does have a response, then if it's email sent, then I'm going to say success. If it's not email sent, I'm going to say it failed. So whatever the text was that I sent in from my service is the email response. That's what I'm going to display as an alert. And that's what I'm putting in here. So you would think that that would all work just the way it is, but it won't. It's not going to work until I go into the startup file and I add in as a service, and I'm putting it in as add singleton my email service. And that is going to now basically make that service available to the page to be able to call and then be able to run. So those are all of the components to be able to make this work. So I invite you to take the pages, download them, play with them, and please send me a comment or let me know if this was helpful. Thank you.